Welcome back to school, that is. And I am your teacher, Miss Connie. All right, guys. God, I loved back in the day when kids used to call me Miss Connie. So a lot of you guys don't necessarily know this because I don't really advertise it anymore because I don't really work with this population as much as I used to. But your girl used to work a lot with kids. So I used to work at a place called Behavin'. So there, they used like more behavioral model, helping the littles. So like, I believe it was like, your 3-year-olds, your up till 7-ish. And then I also am trained in PCIT, which is like a childhood therapy where you have kids with behavioral issues, and we're going to try to use positive reinforcement and some other like therapeutic techniques to change that. CFCBT, which is trauma work for kids who have been exposed to trauma, and just different various ways of like working with them to help them process that. And then I also dabble in a lot of sand tray, but I love sand tray for my adults. But it's really, 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 really cool to get to witness children doing that because it's impressive. Just how like their little brains like process things in the tray. It's extremely rewarding. But like I said, as you know, my days in the schools are fewer and far between now. And so I don't really, work one-on-one with kids in the schools or get to be with my teens in the schools like I used to. I mean, I still have them here in my private practice, but the dynamic is a little different. So the reality, or the reason that I'm making this video, and I feel like I took way too long just to get to this point, is because kids are going back to school, and I think it's important for us to touch up on a couple of things as they return. I used to say, October is mental health season. It's when mental health kicks up, but also when you work with kids, you would see this influx, and a lot of it was, again, some school referrals, and that's essentially because school is seeing behaviors that maybe parents have missed or that are adding up differently inside the home. So I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple of things to help you who are my followers on this page who have kids, and just kind of think of things from a different perspective. So in general, whenever someone would message me, especially if it was like a child under 3, and then the message would say, I have a really bad kid, blah, 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 I'd be like, your kid doesn't have a problem. Like, obviously the kid, may need some guidance or some hands or some hands-on activity, but I would always say that, like, the parent is the problem in terms of, like, the parent has to also do the therapeutic work. And so that is my main focus today, is to work with you, parent, so that way I can help empower you and give you maybe some tools or different perspective to help your children. So one of the things that I want to talk about is how, like, just as like therapy for littles are going to be so much different than therapy for adults, so is how children are going to express that they're anger, or that they're angry, anxious, whatever negative belief it is, or are having difficulty. You have to remember that kids don't have the same capacity and ability to like articulate, think, or developmentally aren't or have not reached the same milestones, and so they can't necessarily process these complicated or hard issues that they want to express, and so they need you, the parent or the role model, to help them, guide them through that. And so what does that look like? Sometimes you're going to find like these behaviors are going to come out through behaviors. So like we're going to have an increase in behaviors. How I like to explain this is, instead of, your kids saying to you, I'm super, sad that people were picking on me, maybe they're just like not going to talk, or maybe, they had an issue with someone or something at school, and then they're going to just like act out, lash out, and or like get physical. It's like, or like, they get frustrated, and then you start to see a lot of this. I always say, when I see this, it's always good for an improper intervention to try to help curve their behavior, because this is a signal saying I'm flustered, I'm stressed, or I'm angry, or I'm mad. And that's really hard. I think about how many adults struggle, right, with the idea of even saying, I had a really bad day at work. My coworker made me feel bad because of X, Y, and Z. And I really would love it if you, my partner, could help work through that. Like, adults have a hard time saying that. So if you're a kid who has no abstract thought, you're going to just act a fool. And so behaviors is huge. You might see body aches or pains or reporting things. You might just notice a change in appetite or a change in sleep. And these are all like kind of things to look for. But if you have any questions about anything in particular, we can go down that rabbit hole as well. And so I will, this week put some posts on like some of these skills or like techniques in more detail, but I just kind of want to touch up on a little bit. And then if we need to do like a Q&A or you guys want to talk about it in detail, I'm happy to do that. Oftentimes when we start seeing behaviors, and the behaviors are kind of what parents start to notice, I always say, take note, are these behaviors happening at school? Are they happening at home? Are they happening at dance class? Are they happening, like in a hobby? Or where are these taking place? So I always say like who, what, when, and where, and why. Because I think it's really important to start like, developing a pattern of what is actually triggering your child. Because maybe if you notice every time this happens, we see this behavior, that would also give you some insight on how to help your child. But with that being said, so when they come, you want to know the who, what, when, where, and why. How can we best help them work through a behavior? So when a behavior happens, they're trying to say something different. One of the things that I like to talk about a little bit is to have an understanding of the who, what, when, and where when we start seeing behavior issues. Because if we can find some commonalities between where and how these things are occurring, then we can gain some insight on possibly what it is that your child is trying to communicate that they need from you to help them. While, that would be the ideal situation, sometimes there is no consistency and it's a little bit more challenging. And so sometimes I like to tell parents, or I guess I don't sometimes tell them, I say, if we don't know and we need to address the behavior, we need to address the behavior and put some emotions to them. So the best way to help a child, so for example, if they're feeling anxious or having an issue, is to sit with them. Now this is not an easy task because, for example, if someone who was our parent or our adult-like figure never sat with us, then we as adults struggle with the ability to sit with those emotions. And so let's just take, for example, if your parent never lets you be anxious or sad or mad when your child is mad, right? Then you almost have an adverse reaction to that. So one of the things I always encourage you to think about as the guiding parent is where maybe in your life do you think your parent struggled emotionally to help you with? Were they positive feelings like happiness, joy, anger? Like, did you have a depressed parent who didn't know how to sit in those feelings? And so, when your kid comes home with a positive test result, or they want to share some exciting news, or they are trying to express some type of love, is that difficult for you to sit with them? Or is it negative feelings, if they start crying or they have an issue and they need you to help them work through that? Are you quick to say, all right, let's move on, stop crying? I'll, how many times do we hear, I'll give you a reason to cry, when you don't know how to help your kid manage through that. So I always say, do the work. Think about, your upbringing and say, who sat with me well? And if no one did, then learn that this might be an area that you might want to explore, because when you work on yourself in certain areas, then you are better able to help facilitate or change for your child and help them process things through. So let's just take, for example, your child is mad. And I always want to say this for an example, because, people are like, my child's mad, and being mad is a natural emotion. Like being angry, it's not that they're angry, it's how we're going to help them through it. So The example I like to give in therapy sometimes is, can you imagine if you were at a party and all of a sudden, maybe you're talking to like some really cool person and a cool guy, or, you're really hitting it off with someone, and then your friend comes up to you and says, we're leaving. Okay, you're gonna be upset. That is the natural consequence or a natural reaction to something. So even when we as parents, or we as like, you know, supervisors, are giving a direction to a child and we give them a boundary or we give them a rule, it can be natural for them to just not be in agreement. Pick up your toys. We are leaving. Like, they have emotions too. And so, helping them through that and saying, sometimes I always say, give them a cue. Like, let them know. Like, so for example, if your friend comes up to you and says, hey, we're leaving in 15 minutes, that gives you time to get that person's number, wrap it up, and figure out how you're gonna, maybe see each other another time, really make the last 15 minutes meaningful, all of those things. And so if you give your child some warning about something and you prep them for a situation and you walk them through that beforehand, you're also more likely to not see that meltdown. But then, if they say, I don't want to, or, when they're angry about it, and then say, I understand why you would be angry, and sit with them and say, why are you angry? And sit with them in that emotion and say, I understand that you're having a lot of fun, but we can have fun another time, and I'm sure I could set up a date. And you kind of like walk through and problem solve with your child on how to do it. So, it's the idea of saying, like, this is how we feel, labeling that emotion, letting them sit with that emotion, finding solutions and coping skills. Can you do those coping skills now? Can we do those coping skills later? The other thing that I think is super important is how we are like giving directions and labeling our children, or giving direction and like labeling things for our kids. So a couple things is, you want to be concise and direct about what you want, because that helps your kid follow along. Because remember, they don't think like we do, and they don't have the ability to abstract think. So for example, if you say to a child, stop that, that's dangerous. Okay, they might start associating the word dangerous with things they can't do. But what does that mean? Does that mean they need to walk? Does that mean they need to get down the chair? Does that mean they need to, I don't know, like put their seatbelt on? Like, there's so many different definitions of what danger could be. And so if you want to see a behavior, we need to label that behavior for them. And with that being said, kids are going to respond to attention. So good attention or bad attention, and the goal is to get them to respond to good attention. So it's also just as imperative to be labeling the positive things that you love seeing in your children. Again, this is another suggestion that if they are doing something that you like to see, we're going to want to compliment and reinforce that behavior. The more specific, the better. So instead of saying great job with what? Great job smiling, great job picking up, great job being me. Like, am I getting rewarded because this is Tuesday and I'm your child? You want to be very clear. So, good job picking that toy up. Good job helping me. You're so helpful with X, Y, and Z. Good job with your schoolwork. Another way you can also like change some of these up is by reinforcing traits. So if you want to see traits, then you're doing and you want them to be like globally. So good job picking up your toys. Okay, that is specific. I understand what I did. I picked up my toys, so yay me. Now, if I want to see that transfer into other areas, I would say something along the lines of, good job cleaning up your toys. I love it when you're organized, or orderly. Or I love it when you help me out and are super helpful with cleaning the house. Or, well, that's very specific, but I love it when you help me. So then we're reinforcing help as a behavior. One thing I always say too is don't. Oh my God, I just did it to you guys. So, do not, and I get to say it, I guess, use the word don't. So here's a little exercise I always like to say, like, that saying, don't think of a pink elephant. What happens is your mind, the brain, automatically, in order to not see a pink elephant, you have to what? See the pink elephant to not see. So when we say don't, your child hears do. So instead of saying don't run, try saying walk. If you say don't hit your sister, would translate to play nicely, or I love it when you do kind touches, or this is how we play kindly with our baby sister. So again, it's that modeling and that structuring or restructuring of the word. So I strongly encourage, right, us to avoid using those negatives to describe the behavior. That and also just brings more attention to the behavior that we don't want to see. Okay, I'm like trying to go over a couple of these things quickly. Okay, so let's talk about really quick. This is something that I'm very passionate about. So ADHD. So you'll find that, oh, you guys, I'm such a nerd. Google ADHD US map, and it's like fascinating because you're gonna find. Oh, I don't want to ruin it, but I'm going to. So skip ahead if you don't want me to ruin this. But you will find that we have higher diagnosis of ADHD in rural community, or not rural, urban communities that are poorer, smaller, and kids don't have areas to run. We're gonna see it more on the East Coast, or not East Coast, but yeah, like those like smaller states, like more like urban areas, and then also an increase in boys. And so sometimes, what happens is we see issues at school, and then we recommend that the parents do interventions such as therapy, or we take them to the doctor, and then the kid gets labeled with ADHD. So one of those factors is also poverty rates, and as we know, poverty unfortunately is like a correlation to a lot of other mental health issues, but in particularly with this one that is interesting is that we see a correlation with kids who have been traumatized and ADHD. And so what you're going to notice is when a kid has been traumatized, those symptoms look and like kind of mirror ADHD. They're inattentive. They have difficulty concentrating. They're fidgety. They're hyper vigilant. And so oftentimes, or sometimes, these children who have been experiencing trauma, right, have then been labeled as ADHD. And what we do know about ADHD too is that if your child does have ADHD, and then on top of trauma, we're going to see that and heighten as well. So this is just a little component or a piece of advocating for your children, especially because we see this in minority communities. We see this in poverty areas. Please be mindful. Know your of your children and their typical behaviors. And if you have concerns about it possibly being trauma, I encourage you to explore those with your medical provider and also maybe your therapeutic provider if you are seeing someone for your children. Just to wrap this up, I just want to go back to the idea of when you help yourself, you help your child. So the more mindful you are about maybe your frustrations or what you need to work through, the more you can sit with children and help them go through that. And like I said, I will post some things on my page that will be helpful for maybe affirmations or just even ways of rephrasing things, complimenting children using label praise, and all those other kind of things. So focus on that positive behavior. Think about sometimes when we want to see a behavior change, you cannot take a behavior away without implementing a new one. So keep that in mind. You can't just say, stop doing this. No longer are we going to participate in that. You have to give them something. So give them a coping skill, give them an intervention, give them a space to talk, grow, so that way they can help themselves or empower themselves to appropriately navigate through that. Kind reminder again to remember where your child is developmentally, because that is going to impact how they are taking in information and how they are outputting information. And I know that is something that is stressful. Being a parent isn't an easy task, so by any means, you're not going to have perfect days. I think it's a circle of security. Therapy says, where parenting is good enough, and that's the goal, right? Is to be able to make a mindful practice of showing up for your children every day. But some days aren't going to be amazing days, and it is okay. I will poke some providers who solely practice this type of work, but know that you're more than welcome to come on over to call Kani. We'll talk about good plans or interventions for your children, or can possibly make some recommendations. There are great child play therapists and a lot of other great options in the community. So we're not limited to that. Remember to, just give your children that undivided attention. They say 5 minutes of like effective interaction. In PCAT, that is, will fill up your child's bucket for a 24-hour period. If you have a child, between the ages of 3 and 7, and you're seeing some behavioral issues, this could maybe be a good therapy for you. I'm happy to talk to you about that. But like I said, call Kani a talk, and we can either I can help you help them, or I can help you, and in return, you will be able to give back to them and be a better person for your family. So thank you for coming and listening to me, and I wish you all well. I wish all of your kids a safe, happy, successful, and victorious school year, and may they all just like bloom and grow where they are planted. Little side note is, is really just focus on understanding and developing, or like seeing where your child's gifts are, their natural gifts, really enhancing those or empowering them to really act or go on that, such a strength-based provider. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to, lend some ideas or an ear. With that being said, it was my pleasure and my joy to talk to you guys a little bit about children. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. So take care.